Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Dr. Albers this evening, and we're going to be going over some new information that we've uncovered. And let me just get a few things straightened out here, and we'll go ahead and begin. Dr. Albers, how are you, by the way?
I'm very well, thank you, Scott. And how are you?
Not doing too bad. A little tired, but I'll get over that.
Okay, good.
Okay. I'm just pulling up the live chat here real quick. Bear with me, everybody. Okay. All right, well, I got that all under control. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, folks. Just give me a second here. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go into a lot of information in the course of the next couple of weeks. And this is going to deal with interplanetary climate change. And there's a lot of information that we're uncovering. And we're kind of going back in time because, you know, I've mentioned before that this is the biggest cover-up in world history. Ladies and gentlemen, this changes everything that we've been taught. This changes almost everything in astrophysics, astronomy, science, earth space science. I mean, this literally does change everything. And as we go through this and we uncover the information, you're going to clearly see now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that all of this information was being denied to the world population for many, many reasons. The number one reason is because they didn't want to panic the entire world population. Number two, they would have to rewrite every science book on the face of this planet. And then they would have to explain why they covered all of this up, why each government lied to their people. So there's a lot of information here. Dr. Albers has been working all day on the first part of the interplanetary climate change. Dr. Albers, I have your report up on the screen. You can see that clearly?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you as you need me to pan.
Scott.
Yeah, as you need me to pan up and down, just let me know. But I'm going to turn it over to you. And here we go, folks.
Yeah, this was very interesting. Like I mentioned in this article, I watched this David Wilcock video where he starts telling us about what has been happening with the sun over some years. And as I listened to it, I said, but this correlates with what I have found out about the stellar cores. And as you know, you and I have been talking about this for many months now, even years now, how there is this evidence that the stellar cores are here. We can see them in the images from the satellites that are observing the sun and the spacecraft. And so they are there. We have the evidence. And what David was saying was what the sun has been reacting to their presence. Well, David was not talking about the stellar cores. He was basically talking about what's been happening with the sun. And I thought it correlates perfectly with the stellar cores being there. And he starts out talking about the X flares. The X-ray flares that have been occurring. And he noticed that the strongest ones, well, actually, flares only started happening, and he details from a table, in 1989. And he talks about this flare that occurred in 1989 and how there were protons ejected, they were relativistic, and they impacted the Earth's magnetosphere, and so on. And I thought that was interesting because from what I have observed of the stellar cores, they actually provoke the sun into having these solar flare events and CME events. It actually seems like the sun would not have these unless it was provoked by an outside force, and that's the stellar cores, although comets can also do this to the sun. So the fact that these solar flares seem to have started in 1989 was interesting to me. And as you can see, this is a picture of the protons leaving the solar surface. And they would be relativistic. They accelerated to very high speeds. Now, the last solar flare we had was last year on June 9th. It was an X9.3. And it actually occurred after the sun had gone quiet for an extended period of time. There were no sunspots in March. So this was a surprise that the sun suddenly became quite active and had an X-class flare in June of 2017. And the stellar cores can explain this as well. And I will talk about it some more as we go through this. So the other thing that it talks about is about the CMEs. And here I detail how the comets, and James McKinney found that comets cause these solar events and CMEs and solar flares by drawing electron current from the sun. So the fact that these comets draw current and cause the sun to have these solar flare events immediately tells us that the stellar cores are doing the same thing. They're drawing electrons from the sun, and they do so because they draw energy from the sun. So electrons are drawn towards the stellar cores. And when this happens, and if you have a large stellar core drawing a lot of energy, then the sun eventually explodes into these sort of events. And so if we go down a little bit more.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick comment when we were talking about the X flare that happened last year. You know, ladies and gentlemen, that was a massive X flare, and it only missed the Earth, I think, by about maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days. If that X flare would have been directly Earth facing, we probably would still be sitting here in the dark a year later, because that would have wiped out the electrical grid on the entire planet, probably, pretty much, because the area where that X flare occurred was slightly, I believe it was either slightly above or slightly below the equatorial region of the sun, and we are slightly below that area. So I believe we missed it by a couple of days. We were able to capture it on the SDO spacecraft cameras, and you know, it was a pretty exciting event. Everybody reported on it, and it did surprise a lot of people in the science community, astronomers, astrophysicists, and so on. But go ahead, Dr. Albers. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So what happens is these objects actually, by drawing energy, supercharge the surface of the sun right below them. And comets do the same thing. As you can see, this is one particular comet that we see here. It's comet Arend-Rowland. And it came through the solar system in 1957. As you can see, there's a spike in front of it. That spike is the electron current that it's drawing from the sun's corona. And it means that there is a high electric field at the surface of the sun that connects to this comet through this current. This current is always there when they are comets, but it's not always visible. It's only visible when it's extremely intense current. But it's always there, and it will be there between stellar cores and the sun. And in fact, we often see the plasma connection between the stellar core and the sun. And that plasma connection means there's a very high electric field at that region on the sun. And the sun gets very hot and supercharged, and then it's likely to have these explosions. And this is also the reason why we see stellar cores within CME material, because they're actually provoking the sun into having these energetic events. So, of course, we will find the object that's responsible within the CME that then results. And so this is why you have captured these photographs where you can see, obviously, there are spherical objects within the CME material. And these are the stellar cores that have entered the solar system and are causing these things. Now, by drawing energy from the sun, these objects are weakening the sun. So as the sun gets weaker for a while, it becomes less active. But by drawing energy from the sun, and I found out this energy is associated with the gravitational attraction an object is able to exert on other objects, and it's on matter. So as the sun gets weaker, its gravitational hold on its own matter decreases. So as the stellar cores continue to draw energy from the sun, eventually they seem to get more active. And that is because now the sun is no longer strong enough to hold on to its matter as well as before. So the stellar cores are able to more easily provoke it into having these events. So that's why the sun should go through cycles. It becomes less active for a while, and then as it continues to lose energy, suddenly it can become more active again. So, and this is what David Wilcock talks about as well, because he talks about the possibility of a solar flash. And we can move down a little bit more, Scott.
Yeah, there's a few people that are saying that they're hearing an echo. If you're hearing an echo, folks, our sound is absolutely perfect. Simply refresh your screen and come back into the live stream. You know, I just want to make a few comments here real quick. You know, folks, some of you may think we're going over and rehashing old information. And yes, that may be true, but you have to understand one thing. Over the last couple of years, we've been charting all of this information. We've been collecting all of this data, and we need to go back in time to compare year after year to see where we're at right now in July of 2018. In 2016, things were pretty active on the sun and here on our planet. In 2017, things picked up. The pace picked up. Coronal mass ejections, activity on the sun, an absolutely horrible hurricane season, worldwide flooding, earthquakes all over the entire planet. Now, the volcanic eruptions weren't too bad for 2016 and 2017. However, we've seen that ramp up during the last half of this year. So we see what's happening with Kilauea and a few other volcanoes. So we're not just going back and rehashing old information. We're actually showing you all of this timeline as things progress forward. So, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, ladies and gentlemen, but things are not going to get any better. Okay, we're not just going to wake up tomorrow morning and things are going to be peachy. They're actually going to get worse as time goes on. And with all of this new information that I've uncovered, and Dr. Albers, it's going to take both of us weeks and weeks to go over all of this. Dr. Albers is going to be analyzing all of this information, and some of it does go back in time.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're going back in time and we're pulling at this data, it is showing you clearly that all of this was being held from the public, from the world population. It was being held from science. Why? Because it would change everything. And it would let people know that something in our solar system was awry. Something was not right. And as the weeks progress, we're going to be going through and showing you actual evidence that every single planet in our solar system has changed over a period of time. Now, normally it takes these planets in our solar system millions of years, if not billions of years, to change drastically. However, that's not the case. And as we've been going back through the beginning of this data, it's going to show you in detail scientific evidence that all of the planets in our solar system have heated up. There has been a massive change in the so-called climate of our solar system. That's very unusual. That's very stunning. And there has to be a reason. Now, there have been a lot of papers written on this. Some of these papers and these documents have been, let's just say, hushed up. Some of the documents that were going to be released and published and placed into a book, the day before the publishing was going to begin and the documents were going to be sent in, they were all stolen. All of it. And then it was changed. And then it was mysteriously released onto the internet, but with the wrong information. And it took certain individuals a few years to, well, they really weren't able to stop what was happening, but it did take them some time to correct it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I just wanted to add that, Dr. Albers, because it's just very, very important that everybody knows that we're not just going over old information.
Yes.
There's a lot of people coming on board that really don't know what we're talking about. Some of it is pretty deep into science, and that's why Dr. Albers tries to explain it the best that she can. But,
yes,
we're gonna go ahead and move forward. Go ahead.
Now, before we move forward, I think I'd like to say something about that as well, because what we are trying to do is understand what is going on in the solar system so we can understand what's happening to our planet. And that means reviewing sometimes old information. But I'd like to point out something else, that a good theory means that it will be able to explain cause and effect. In other words, if you ask most solar scientists, why did the sun have that solar flare? And they will start talking to you about the fact that when the sun's more active, it may have more solar flares. They'll talk to you about cycles and probabilities. And that shows they don't really understand the process that is going on, because true understanding is not there because it's actually been hidden. Whenever a scientist makes progress in understanding the real processes that are going on in the sun and in the solar system and sometimes the universe, they are blocked from publishing because this information is being blocked. They don't want us to know what's really going on. But when you have a good theory and you start understanding the mechanism and start understanding how the sun works, then you see a cause and effect. In other words, something happens to an object that you really know. Let's suppose you have some kind of a vacuum cleaner in your house. If you really understand how this thing works, anything that happens to it, you will understand what causes it. This is true understanding of how an object works. And when you truly understand how the sun works, you will understand what causes a solar flare. And you will know why a solar flare occurred, because it was an effect and it had a cause. Whilst most solar scientists cannot go there because they don't understand how the sun really works.
Yep, exactly.
So this is how I've developed my theory based on observing these stellar cores. And with my theory, I can explain why a solar flare occurred and the mechanism behind it. And it has to do with the fact that the stellar cores are low in energy. This causes them to have low gravitational influence. And in the process of drawing energy, they cause the sun, that point on the sun, to be energized. And then certain reactions occur which causes these explosive events. And I can explain the whole process because I now understand through observing the stellar cores how the sun works. So that's a mark of a good theory. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm still growing in understanding, but I can explain the cause and effect connection now using this theory.
Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of what Dr. Albers is talking about and a lot of the information that we've uncovered is clearly showing and will show that our sun is becoming very unstable. Now, listen, I'm going to tell you straight up, don't let anybody fool you by making statements that, this is bunk information. Oh, Dr. Albers and Scott, they're lying, blah, 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 blah. No, the data will prove it, ladies and gentlemen. Each and every planet in this solar system over a course of time, and it wasn't a long period of time, okay? We've all been alive. All of us have been alive as this was happening. And as the sun becomes more unstable, it may seem quiet at times. But folks, that's really not a good thing. Because as the sun is in its so-called quiet mode, the instability of the sun would increase. Now, you're going to start hearing a lot of terminology, and we're going to be using the term solar flash. This solar flash, this goes back to Major Ed Dames, and he was a remote viewer for the United States military for over 20 years. And if you want to know more about Ed Dames, just Google or type into the YouTube search engine, Major Ed Dames, Dames, and he was a remote viewer for the United States military, and he's written several books, a lot of YouTube videos, and a lot of talk shows. And his last book was just absolutely mind-blowing because it was in relation to this solar flash, and he referred to it as the kill shot. And what we're referring to is just a massive solar flare, CME, a blast coming from the sun. And it will reach our planet within how long, Dr. Albers? It's like a two-part punch.
Yes. If it's a really energetic event, the first particles can take just about 10 to 15 minutes to reach here. After the first wave will reach within about 10 minutes.
So we're talking about photons blasting.
Yeah, that's right. There will be extreme
the speed of light.
Gamma rays.
Yes.
Yes.
So we're going to go ahead and move on with this article. But folks, grow with us, learn with us, because eventually something like this is going to occur. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen a year from now. But there's no doubt in our minds that the sun is definitely becoming very unstable because of these objects that are out there, especially the one that is the largest.
Yes.
It's just a matter of time.
That's right.
Knowing about it and being able to maybe slightly prepare, having the knowledge is the key. And spreading the word by sharing our videos and, following our Facebook page, helping other people out understand what is going on. And at least you have some way of gaining more information, tracking the information. And I mean, we're really doing the best we can. There's so much to go over each and every day. It's kind of mind-boggling sometimes. But Dr. Albers has been doing a fantastic job already on this new information. And again, there is tons of it. It will be weeks and weeks for us to pour over it. But as Dr. Albers goes over the information, she's going to be creating reports, and she'll be uploading those reports to her YouTube channel. They will also be available on the Planet X News YouTube channel. And getting back to the realvideo.com new video platform. We started uploading some videos 2 days ago. They're still tweaking some things real quick. So, we will be uploading all of those videos to real.video as soon as things get tweaked a little bit better over there, but they're doing a great job so far. But Dr. Albers, let's go ahead and jump back to this information.
Yes. So you mentioned some very important points, and that is about the possibility of the solar flash, which to me is extremely important, because that kind of thing can completely destroy the surface of our planet. And the solar flash becomes more likely as the sun becomes weaker. And as you mentioned, the larger objects are more likely to have a stronger effect on the sun. So the stronger solar flares will occur when there are these larger objects close to the sun. And also the strongest reaction will come when the object first arrives at the sun's corona. These objects arrive at the sun's corona and then they stay around. They may move a little further away and then move back in, but they are the most depleted in energy when they first arrive from outside the solar system. They're very fast moving. So when they first arrive, we may get these strong solar flares. So this may be what happened in July of last year with this one that may have arrived. It was still dark. We could see that it was dark within the holes around the plasma surrounding it. So this may have been a new arrival. But as the sun gets weaker, it cannot hold on to its plasma as well as before. So when another larger object arrives, it's more likely to have an even more intense explosion. And that's when a solar flash eventually becomes possible. And a solar flash is basically a CME erupting from most of the solar surface. So it's just a huge amount of solar surface releasing plasma. And it can release it from all the way around the sun, especially the equatorial region. Now here is what I use this diagram to illustrate what happens, what the energy drawing mechanism really is. The stellar core is like a cold object. The sun is a hot object. The sun has a lot of energy. The stellar core has very little energy. The bar in the middle would be the connection that the stellar core makes with the sun. Then energy from the sun starts flowing from the sun's interior towards the stellar core. And what that does, it heats up the surface of the sun and the connection itself, the bar connecting the two. And that causes the electric field to increase. It causes the flashes to be, these solar flares to be more likely, because these are a result of a very intense electric field. And it can then lead to these explosive events. And that's because the surface of the sun basically will heat up more and more because the stellar core is drawing heat from inside the sun, from its core. So I just thought I would illustrate that.
Yeah,
Now,
that's a very good illustration. I mean, that clearly made me understand, even though we were talking about it earlier. Viewing that illustration, understanding that definitely helped me out there. Let's go over your next diagram here.
Yeah, this is where I illustrate my theory on gravity, and it comes from observing these effects the stellar cores are having on the sun. And what actually occurs, it's all about photons. Photons feature strongly. And what occurs is that particles are inside photons. And when photons, and it has to be high energy gamma rays, come from the sun, and these would come because of the lightning. It's actually the sun's plasma is an electrical plasma in arc mode. So basically, it's in intense lightning mode continuously. So that means photons would be emitted. And the most energetic photons would, if they move through these regions of intense electric field, and remember I said where the sun is hotter, basically you get a more intense electric field, then the particles, the protons and the electrons come out of the photon. And then the energy of the photon goes into the mass of the particles, and the rest exists within the particles as energy. So there's photon energy within the particles. The same thing happens with galaxies that happens with stars. Stars can have these energetic events that leads to particle creation. And Alton Harp, an astronomer, found out that the same thing happens with galaxies. Active galactic nuclei, when they become very bright, they develop very high electric fields. And then they emit strong bursts of light, which condense into matter. And these are then called quasars. And quasars are actually like baby galaxies because in the course of time, they unfurl arms and they turn into galaxies themselves. So Halton Arp showed that matter creation is occurring all the time in the universe. Galaxies are giving birth to other galaxies, and it all starts with them emitting light. So all this came together for me because I realized what's happening with galaxies is what's happening with stars, just on a smaller scale. So light is turning into particles.
So as they say, our universe is rapidly growing. I mean, that is a fact. Our universe is growing at a much faster pace than scientists even, delved into many years ago. I don't even know how they would actually come up with that type of information. I mean, it still amazes me at some of the things that they talk about when they refer back to 65 million years ago or a billion years ago. I believe just a lot of that is a lot of just theory and conjecture.
Yes, it is. Alton Harp documented very carefully what he saw, and he actually showed that the Big Bang model was, he falsified the Big Bang model with his observations. And everything he said was based on observations. And I believe in using observations to develop the theory. And he did the same thing. That's why I deeply respect his work. So here I explain that this leads to the idea that planets and stars are not actually that different. That galaxies, the sun has a solar wind. Galaxies, instead of a solar wind, eject a continuous amount of light, which then condenses into planets and stars. So the solar wind for a galaxy is the production of stars and planets. And stars and planets are not that different from each other. They all have cores within them. And within that core, there is nuclei that will, in the course of time, decay, and that is split into two. That's why I put that image there. There's the parent nucleus, and it splits into a daughter nucleus and an alpha particle, for example, and it releases energy in the form of gamma rays. That energy then goes into the particles of that particular object, be it a star or a planet. And that energy feeds all the processes of a star, for example. It's what allows the star to generate light. That's where it's coming from. So these nuclei in the core, like a reservoir of energy that the object has to power all its processes for the next billion years.
Very, very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Now, in this video, David Wilcock talked about the Carrington Event of 1859. And when he talked about this, I thought, oh my goodness, because I've discovered, I believe that the stellar cores first started entering the solar system in 1850. And 1859 is only 9 years after that. And the way I could, why I believe that they started coming in 1850 is because noctilucent clouds were first observed on Earth in 1850. And I've discovered that noctilucent clouds can be explained by stellar core, small amounts of stellar core matters like dust or small particles coming into the atmosphere, causing cloud condensation to occur around them. And then the fact that this matter absorbs energy would mean that you end up with clouds that give off light. But you actually need a different form of matter that causes these energy effects in order for clouds to emit light. It's not normal for a cloud, a normal Earth cloud, to emit light, and noctilucent clouds emit light. So that means that I believe they started coming in 1850. Probably not the larger objects. Probably what started coming in was smaller particles, dust maybe, smaller objects. And then maybe in 1859, possibly what occurred was a larger one arrived at the sun's corona. And the larger one would then be able to provoke the sun into suddenly developing sunspots and then having a solar flare. So I believe that's what occurred at the Carrington event. There was a solar flare, there was a release, there was a CME, most likely after that, and then it caused the problem. There were no real power grids then. There were telegraph lines. So the CME impacting the magnetosphere, ionizing the ionosphere, induced currents in the telegraph lines, and that caused the telegraph lines to shock the operators badly. And in some cases, papers even caught fire within the offices.
Yeah, that was an amazing event. You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to start going back on your own and listening to and viewing some really neat information, go back and Google the Carrington Event, 1859, because that's going to show you the damage that can occur. If the same event were to happen today, in today's times, it would be a hell of a lot more damaging than it was in 1859, simply based on our electronic devices, our power grid. So this was definitely an event, a historical event. And then I want you to think what these people back in 1859, what they actually thought. I mean, this would almost be borderline, is the world about to come to an end?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're just put yourself back in 1859, and this is occurring
Yeah.
around the world. So it was a very, very interesting time. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely something to, add to your mind. So it was the Carrington Event, 1859. Check it out. I believe there's been, a lot of documentaries on it. I believe there was even a movie. I think it was a low budget movie that was made about it, kind of. It was more of an end of the world type situation. But this also correlates with ancient man and ancient people going back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 years ago, possibly even longer than that. Because there is some mention that one of these solar flashes occurred, excuse me, I think about 25,000 years ago. So again, science is changing. There was not a lot that was really documented and placed into school books, and therefore, a lot of people don't really know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why we're going back in time to, try to analyze some of these situations. But this event in 1859, the Carrington event, was the key.
Yeah,
It was
it was a very important event because it showed the kind of what these induced currents can do. Basically, they cause power surges, and that means that they blow transformers. Now, I remember that David, I didn't put it in this in the article, but David mentioned in the video that someone has invented a way of stopping any of these power surges from blowing these from blowing up the transformers, basically making transformers EMP proof. But none of the governments in the world are interested in spending money in making our power grids EMP proof. And this shows that actually they want the Earth's population, or most of the Earth's population, to die as a result of an event like this, because that's what would occur. Without power, our civilization is now totally dependent on the power grid. Without it, we cannot get food.
Yes, Dr. Albers is right. She just touched on a subject. This is also part of what we've uncovered. Mm-hmm. Is that there have been devices that have been invented to protect our transformers and to protect our power grids. And economically, it really wasn't that expensive to upgrade these power grids. But once again, a fantastic invention to, help prolong man's survival in the threat of a cataclysm. What do? They sweep it under the rug. And it is not being used even today in 2018. So once again, the threat of stomping down good information, good inventions, just like the cures for cancer and many other diseases and illnesses around the world. These doctors, they end up losing their lives. Scientists end up losing their lives. They go missing. It's just a very sad situation that mankind is actually like this. There's also further information detailed about the world population. And this goes into that Georgia Guidestones story. So there's a lot of correlation to what we're digging up. It's probably going to lead to a lot of trouble for us, but I don't care. I'm sure Dr. Albers doesn't care either,
Yeah.
But the world population is something that is very critical to these evil individuals. They feel that the world population is entirely and extremely too high, too populated. They believe the 500 million mark on this planet is where we need to be. I don't see how they would ever really get to that point, control depopulation. I mean, that's a lot of people on this planet.
Yeah.
And, as I've mentioned before, you guys can clearly see the civil unrest that is occurring here in the United States, in several European countries. It's getting to the point where it's getting very, very dangerous.
Yes.
And they have all of this information, folks, and they probably have a hell of a lot more than what we have. But we will continue to dig, and as we uncover things, we will let you know. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Dr. Albers, your next
Yeah. So in this diagram, I show how the theory on gravity that I came up with, which I call electro gravity, because it combines electricity and gravity. It's a combination of both, and can explain all these processes that are happening in the sun, and can also explain what happens inside an atom when an electron absorbs a photon. When the electron absorbs a photon, it increases the repulsion between the nucleus and the electron. So the electron moves to a higher orbit or leaves the atom. And that means the atom will now become ionized because it has 3 protons. The 3 red circles represent protons in the nucleus. The red circle with the blue dot in it is a neutron. So there are 3 positive charges in the nucleus, and there are 3 electrons which are negatively charged. So in total, in this way, we would have a neutral atom, the same number of positive and negative charges. But if 1 electron leaves the atom, we have 1 less negative charge. So we have 1 too many of the positive. So this becomes a positive ion. And through this process, I can explain how energy absorption leads to this process occurring. Now, the reverse occurs when an ion captures an electron. Then the photon is given off. And when the photon's given off and is detected, it's seen by the eye as light coming from that point in the sky. And so this is what occurs in noctilucent clouds, the luminescent clouds. First, they become excited because of the energy drawing process, because this matter absorbs energy. And so they lose electrons. Then the electrons are recaptured, and that causes the cloud to emit light. And it's exactly the same process that occurs in the sun, because as the stellar core approaches the sun, it starts drawing energy. So that point on the sun becomes hotter, becomes excited, and then there's this excitation, electrons are lost, and then eventually electrons are reabsorbed and light is emitted. Except what happens in the sun is at a much greater or more energetic event than what is occurring with, say, a cloud like this. But notice this is not a normal cloud. If you look at it, it's emitting orange light, dark blue light, pinkish light. So there are different wavelengths of light being emitted from different regions on this cloud. And it's not normal. Our atmosphere should have white or gray clouds, not clouds that emit this kind of colors. And also, if we see these colors, because the human eye can only detect visible light, this is what we see. But most likely, other wavelengths of light are being emitted, possibly more energetic, such as ultraviolet and X-rays, and sometimes even gamma rays. And this is one of the reasons why the radiation on our planet is increasing to such a level, because the stellar core matter coming in is causing reactions in our atmosphere that is leading to radiation being emitted. And not just radiation, there will be particles being excited, and so possibly even cosmic rays. But most likely, cosmic rays would not be produced in the atmosphere itself, but out in space through interactions, and most likely coming from the sun itself.
Yes, and ladies and gentlemen, if you really want to know why the weather is changing so drastically, we're seeing these heavy downpours of rain, just extreme amounts of rain, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. Just here in the Pittsburgh area over the last couple of days. Once again, we've experienced some heavy downpours on the north end of the city, just completely flooding everything, cars drifting down the roads, and roads buckling, total collapses of roadways, hillsides, mudslides. It's just been really, really crazy since the wintertime. I kind of had a feeling that this was going to happen, but as Dr. Albers was stating, all of this matter infiltrating our ionosphere, charging up everything. Now we're going to see these extreme weather events, not just here and there. We're going to experience them constantly. We're going to see areas of the world that are going to experience extreme amounts of heat. And then as the season changes in the northern hemisphere, that changes and it goes right down to the southern hemisphere. So we switch places. And this is going to continue to occur, but it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse as time goes on. There's no doubt about that in my mind. Going back a couple of years and analyzing everything from then to where we're at now, well, everything has stepped itself up.
Yeah, definitely, Scott. As you said, these objects, because they increase the energetic interactions, will cause more energy to come from the Earth's core, just like they're doing with the sun. And that means the magma will heat up. So we are going to get more and more volcanic activity, and we'll probably get volcanoes forming where there were not volcanoes before. And at the same time, they increase the ionization of our ionosphere in two ways: through direct interactions with the ionosphere, and due to the fact that there's more energy coming from the Earth's core, which is energizing every single layer right through to the ionosphere. So it's from the bottom and the top. And the ionosphere affects our climate. Our ionosphere is actually what drives our climate. When it's more ionized, our climate becomes more unstable. And weather patterns become more unstable, and the storms become more severe, and the changes in hot and cold become more severe as well. So whenever you have hot weather, you're going to get much hotter weather. Wherever you have cold weather, you're going to get much colder weather than before. And this is what we are observing. And we're going to get shifts as well, faster and faster shifts from hot to cold.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. That's already occurring. You know, folks, here in the Pittsburgh area, over the last week, we had extreme temperatures here. The heat index was a little over 100, 101, 102 degrees. Just down the road in another smaller town, one of their main state roads literally buckled in half. They had to close the entire roadway down. It's still closed today. I mean, the pavement, which was concrete, not blacktop, right where the joint of two layers were, it buckled, and it's shooting up in the air like a pyramid 3 feet high on each side. Now, this is not something that we normally go through here at all, but it did occur the other day, and it did startle a few people. They were wondering what the hell happened. Now, they blamed it on the extreme heat, and that is highly possible. We saw this past week a couple of these big pockets of extreme heat. Now, one is still lasting in the Southwest. Los Angeles, San Diego, out there in Nevada. Yes, I know it's desert area out there, but the temperatures are extreme, very extreme. And this is going to continue. I do notice there are some extreme ocean temperatures around the equator, which is natural. However, these ocean temperatures are much higher than what they should be. As I was taking a look at this information, it was kind of ironic because as I was reading and viewing some data, a report came up on the Weather Channel, and they started talking about it right then and there. So, I'm not the only one talking about it. I'm not the only one seeing this. And with these extreme temperatures in these waters, well, that is going to forecast some serious weather situations. We're already into the middle of the summer. And as I said before, wait till we get into July, August, and September, even October. We're going to start to see this hurricane season pick up in the Atlantic, in the Gulf of Mexico, and in the Pacific. Now, here we are. They're already watching several systems in these areas. So, just stay tuned to all of that. Keep a very close eye on the weather where you're at. Now, Dr. Albers, this part of the report dealing with these cosmic rays, you want to go ahead and go ahead over this?
Yes, I'd like to, Scott. So cosmic rays are particles. They are high energy particles moving at very high speed. They have to move at relativistic speeds. And relativistic speeds are speeds that are over 10% of the speed of light, often 50% of the speed of light. Now, David talked about an X-class flare. It was an X-20 from November 10th, 2000. And this solar flare caused protons to reach the Earth in 15 minutes. And protons that reach the Earth in 15 minutes means that they were traveling at least at 80% of the speed of light, and that's their average speed. And that means they were highly relativistic and therefore most definitely cosmic rays. And this means that the sun can be a source of cosmic rays. And most likely it's not just happening when we have cosmic rays, but the stellar cores, as they continue to draw energy from the sun, almost likely accelerating perhaps smaller amounts of protons, but continuously accelerating protons and causing them to turn into cosmic rays. And these cosmic rays would be impacting the Earth all the time. So basically, the stellar cores have turned the sun into a cosmic ray source. And don't forget, NASA keeps telling us, oh, the cosmic rays coming from there, the cosmic rays coming from outside, from several light years away, from other galaxies. But don't forget what NASA always does, and that is to point or draw our attention to something outside our solar system as the source of anything we may be interested in, because they don't want us to actually know what's going on in our own backyard, that is in the inner solar system. So
yes, that is so true. That is so true. Folks, it's like watching the nightly news. You see bad things happening in another city far away from you. So, you watch the story and you think to yourself, okay, well, I'm safe here where I live. So that's the same thing. They're diverting your attention to something they are saying is happening way outside of our solar system, your neighborhood, when in fact, they're just diverting your attention to something else, when in fact, the real danger is in your neighborhood. It is in and around your solar system. Something I want to mention to all of you folks, just in case you don't know. a lot of people ask me about, oh, I look up into the sky and I see the North Star. It's in the same place. The planets are all in the same place. Well, of course, where we are positioned in the Milky Way, yes, everything will stay in place. Our galaxy and our solar system, we're not just sitting calmly in this one little piece of space. We are moving through space. Our galaxy is moving through the universe. Everything around our galaxy is moving. Everything in space is in constant motion. Whether it looks to you like it's stable and sitting there, we are always in motion. We are moving into different parts of our galaxy, our universe, and yes, we will encounter different things as time progresses. So I hope that answers a lot of questions. I had a lot of emails about that, and it's something that you guys should, do a little research on your own, read about it. It's very, very interesting, because a lot of people think that we're just sitting there out there in space and, everything's the same. But in fact, it's the complete opposite.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Scott. We're not still, we're moving. And why the stars seem to be in fixed positions is only because they're extremely far away. So that the small amount of distance that we can move is very tiny amount compared with the distance between the sun and these other stars. And that's why it looks so stable. So you're absolutely right. Now, also mention here, but I'm going to write reports that look at this more carefully. But David reported that the sun's magnetic field has actually more than doubled since 1901. And this magnetic field is actually the interplanetary magnetic field. So it's what is in the solar wind. So this suggests, because most solar scientists will say, yeah, we're getting more cosmic rays because we're going into a minimum. And so the sun is weaker, and that means the sun's magnetic field's weaker, and that allows more cosmic rays to come into the solar system. Well, it has been shown that the sun's magnetic field has more than doubled in just over a century. So that means that cannot be the cause of increased cosmic rays. So that goes back to the fact again that it's actually the stellar cores that have caused the sun to become a source of cosmic rays. Or it's the interaction between the stellar cores and the sun that's causing.
That was a very, very interesting piece of information that he came up with. So,
definitely.
Once again, just to reiterate, folks, the sun's magnetic field has more than doubled since the year 1901. And as Dr. Albers has written, he also mentioned that ice core samples suggest that the sun is the most active now than it has been for 8,000 years.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is clear and substantial change, dramatic change in a very, very short amount of time. Because, folks, in space and dealing with planets and stars, things do take long periods of time for those changes to occur. Long periods of time, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years. And here, with our little star that we rely on, in just over a century, the sun's magnetic field has doubled. So that's extreme. That is a very solid piece of evidence that he's come up with and that we're divulging to you guys. So I'm hoping that, we're all soaking this up, getting into these whole particles and, neutrons and photons and protons. That brings me back to my high school days. And, it was mesmerizing. But Dr. Albers is a theoretical particle physicist. That's what she was teaching and lecturing for the last 17 years. So she knows this information better than she knows the back of her hand. Am I correct?
Well, yes, thank you, Scott. Yes, I mean, I was lecturing on this, and I'm a trained physicist. A trained physicist doesn't mean they know everything and every detail, but the main thing a physicist does is know how to think. That is, we know how to make connections. We will look things up if we have to, but we can make logical, progressive connections and solve problems. This is what we're trying to do. This is what a physicist does. And this is what I've been doing since I started researching what is going on in the solar system. And as you said, what David said made me make a whole lot of connections. And as you said, what has actually happened, don't forget the stellar core system started coming in 1850. So that's nearly 200 years ago. And when they started coming in, they started drawing energy from the sun, and that caused the sun to become more active, much more active. But we were in the infancy of actually studying the sun at that time. So we didn't actually notice what was actually occurring with the sun at the time. And it was only as astronomy developed and we could start detecting these things. Well, by that time, the sun was already much more active. And it's only through studying ice core samples and so on that we start to realize, but wait a minute, 200 years ago, the sun was not active like it was 100 years ago. It became more active because of the interaction with the stellar core system. And in this diagram, I actually again show what occurs, because the stellar core draws energy. It's like a cold object drawing energy from a hot object. That causes energy to come out through all the layers of the earth, and the same thing will happen with the sun. This is why the sun became more active, why its surface got hotter, why the fields it generates got more intense. And wherever the stellar cores were connecting, we started getting the sunspots, and we started getting the solar flares, the CMEs, and that's all due to the stellar cores interacting with it.
Now, as things change on the sun, things change on the earth.
That's right.
It's just a matter of time. And, we can probably go back and correlate a lot of these dates with significant earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on this planet.
That's true.
So that's something that we'll have to delve into, at a much later date when we have some time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to touch base on this Dr. Mike Lockwood.
Yes.
It's in the bottom part of your article here.
So Dr. Mike Lockwood was the one that measured the interplanetary magnetic field and showed that it had increased by a factor of 2.3 since 1901. But I noted here, because I looked at the actual paper, I noted that what he measured was not the magnetic field at the sun itself, but he measured what was in the interplanetary, it was in the solar wind, basically. And the magnetic field in the solar wind would increase because there would be more particles in the solar wind. And why would there be more particles? Because, first of all, the stellar cores would cause the sun to eject more particles. The sun, as it gets weaker, actually loses hold on its outer plasma, and so there would be more particles in the solar wind. Plus, the interactions actually cause the sun to eject more particles. And then the stellar core matter itself would add dust and particles to the solar wind. So we would have more charged particles in the solar wind. And where we have more charged particles moving, we have a more intense magnetic field.
Dr. Albers, I don't mean to interrupt, but something just entered my mind, and going back to the information right up here, where David reported that the sun's magnetic field has actually more than doubled since 1901. And it is more active now than it has been for the last 8,000 years. Now, I bet you that if we were able to go back and start looking at Cancer, radiation from the sun, all of these charged particles that Dr. Albers just talked about, the increase. Therefore, if correct me if I'm wrong, but would we not, as human beings, start to see cancer, more cancer, cancer around the world in many forms? Because, ladies and gentlemen, let's face it, radiation can produce these cancers, tumors, skin cancer. So going back to 1901, and if we were able to chart these cancers up to where we're at now, I believe that we would probably see a massive increase from that 1859 event through 1901 and leading up to where we are today. I mean, am I wrong saying that, or am I
No,
on
not
track?
at all, Scott. I think that's correct because increased radiation will lead to DNA damage and mutations and cancer. It's quite a logical connection that we can make here. So definitely the increase in radiation will lead to an increase in cancer. And the cancer rate has increased the most after 1901 and even more after the Second World War. And well, there are other things that are occurring, including the fact that they started testing nuclear weapons, and that increased the radioactivity within our atmosphere. But definitely the cosmic radiations would have an effect. And if you fly, you are going to get a higher dosage of cosmic radiation because there's just more at higher altitudes. And the first thing that you would notice is that you would get tired or you'd get a cold, because cosmic radiation will decrease your body's energy, because now it's coping with all the damage that the cosmic radiation is causing to your cells. So when the body does not have enough reserves to take care of everything, it's trying to take care of the damage, it means your immune system suffers. So this is most likely why a lot of people get very tired after flying and often get colds after flying.
Yeah. Plus breathing in all that nasty air on an airplane.
Yeah, doesn't help either, of course.
This part of your article, it talks about, in addition, as the sun's gravitational influence decreases, it becomes easier for plasma to accelerate. And accelerate where? Directly towards the Earth and to our inner solar system.
That's right. So that image there actually shows what a solar flash would look like from above the solar system. So that's a solar flash, remember, is a CME erupting from most of the surface of the sun. So that would mean, and here it would be mostly from the equatorial region. So it causes that circular flash to extend outwards towards the planet. It would be along the ecliptic plane towards the planets.
I don't mean to be so dramatic here, but every single planet within the inner solar system would be considered toast.
Yes, definitely.
Burnt toast.
Yes, burnt toast.
Would you even have any idea that this was coming? I mean, if you were a human being standing in front of your house and this occurred, would you have any warning whatsoever?
You may have a few minutes warning. That's all.
What do you think you can
Well,
do?
first of all, you're going to get the huge amount of light hitting the planet. There's no warning from that because nothing travels faster than light. But after you see the light flash arriving, the plasma, the first wave of plasma will just be a few minutes behind that. So you're going to get huge amounts of gamma rays, then huge amounts of very fast moving protons. And after that, you're going to get the actual CME starting to arrive in waves. So basically, what will happen is the power grid will go down almost immediately. And then you're going to get hit by cosmic rays, and you don't see the cosmic rays, but you will see the blinding light that first came, and then you start seeing actually plasma, which is like fire engulfing the planet.
Now, at this particular time, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the New World Order and the powers that be and the deep state, this is when they start running their asses off to their underground bunkers, their underground cities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the reason why. Those bunkers weren't built for nuclear war, because there's never going to be a nuclear war on this planet, because one country would blow the other country up and back and forth, and there would be nothing left. There is no winner in nuclear war. Okay, so we know that. So this is why these huge underground cities and these huge underground bunkers were built for the elite. They know that this is inevitable. They know everything that is going on out there in the solar system. I mean, they have it in, 4K, man. They have the highest resolution imagery. They have all of the data. They know. They probably have a good idea of when this will occur. And that sickens my stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the survival rate, if something like this happened, a lot of people would pass away. And then, all of the other people that made it through the first phases are going to become so sick from radiation poisoning that they'll basically die a slow death.
Yeah.
Being underground in one of these bunkers, and I'm sure that they have them fortified to not allow these cosmic rays to penetrate, because cosmic rays penetrate through everything. You can step outside and they're penetrating through your skin and your body every second. So that is probably the biggest reason for all of the underground tunneling across the entire globe, just not here in the US. Okay, all of these major European countries and Russia and China, they have those tunnels everywhere. They have the underground cities. And if you go back into ancient times, there are several civilizations that tunneled into the earth, and it has been proven that they were living underground for decades, long periods of time. So something must have occurred to push those people deep into mountainsides. So there's a lot of correlating information from the past and with what's happening now. But I think with what is happening now, it is a hell of a lot more extreme. The population on this planet is much greater. And there's a lot more to lose for the elite at this time. Mm-hmm. And that is power.
Yes.
Power over the people.
Yeah. And Scott, they would be able to figure out when this event is likely to happen. Because first of all, what is we likely to see is the sun becoming very quiet. And the weaker it becomes, it will go through these phases where it's very quiet. And then one of the largest stellar cores, a new one arrives and suddenly erupts into activity. And each time this occurs, this eruption into activity may be even more dramatic because now the sun is weaker, cannot hold on to its plasma as well.
Well,
And
I'm sure they got their finger on that panic button.
yeah, and so they see these stellar cores coming in because they don't allow us to see it, but they can see them coming in. Say 3 large ones suddenly come in at a time. And the sun is now so weak. What can happen is the sun can actually blow off its outer envelope of plasma. And that basically will destroy the solar system.
Oh, that would definitely wreak havoc on our atmosphere. You know, folks, if you start thinking about the atmospheres of Mars, I mean, it was completely ripped away, blown completely away. So our atmosphere around the Earth is what allows us to live. In an event like this, I mean, I would almost have to say that our atmosphere would be heavily damaged, if not completely blown away. Who knows?
Yes.
Now, it's lasted all of these, billions of years. It has changed, but it's something to consider. So as we dig further and further into a lot of this information, we're going to go ahead and make the connections. We've already made considerable connections just in the last couple of days, going over the beginning parts of this information, and there will be a hell of a lot more to come, no doubt.
Yeah, and Scott, the next thing that David mentioned was NASA having a pernicious bias against any changes in the local interstellar medium. And the local interstellar medium is space outside of the solar system. It's galactic space close to our solar system. And apparently there was a lot of data that showed that this medium had been changing. And why would it change? Because the stellar core system, which is a much larger system than our solar system, would be coming in through that medium, at least on one side, possibly even from several different directions, because it would occupy a huge part, a much larger part of the galaxy than our solar system would. So this stellar core matter, as it absorbs energy, it electrifies, it charges up any medium it goes through. So if there was any dust, normal dust, not stellar core dust within the medium, and as the stellar cores pass through this medium, they would energize it. This is why it would get hotter. And therefore, this medium would change as the stellar cores came in and passed through it. So, of course, NASA would hide that from us because they don't want us to know what is occurring and that this system is engulfing our solar system. So this is why I found this interesting, that, of course, NASA would not want us to know about this.
Could you do me one favor, and maybe the rest of us listening? Can you define pernicious bias? It's the first time I've heard that word. I thought I had a pretty big vocabulary, but pernicious bias.
Pernicious means evil, and well, I'm not sure what the other words are that mean, but means of evil intent. With evil intent, a bias with evil intent.
So meaning they covered up this information for just really, really bad reasons.
Exactly. Because physicists would want to do their research because they want to understand what's going on. And with evil intent means they are prepared to do any kind of evil act, such as stealing data, killing or causing scientists to be killed, such as Dr. Carrington, as we know that he died under very suspicious circumstances. So basically, we know he was killed in order to keep the information from getting to the public.
So this information was coming out about this interstellar medium. This information was coming out. It was being talked about, studied, and written about. And then they squashed it.
Yes.
And it was almost never heard of again. And this starts going into a lot of these papers and a lot of this information that was going to be published. At the time it was going to be published, it was all stolen. All of it was stolen.
Yes.
Rewritten, changed, and suspiciously released all over the internet. So they basically flooded the internet with garbage.
That's right, because what NASA usually does is they take whatever data comes in and then they will explain what the data means, making sure that there's nothing in the explanation that would lead anybody to think that the stellar core system is coming into the solar system. And they always leave out the fact that electric fields are very involved in how the sun and the solar system works. Because once you start studying electric fields and you start putting it together with what you are seeing, you start realizing that something very strange is going on in our solar system. And you start figuring out the truth of how things are really working.
Yeah, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we're not making this stuff up either as we go along. This actually happened. I mean, they pretty much put all of this to rest. They put it on the back burner, man. They really squashed this and covered it up. And if it wasn't for a few people out there, a lot of this information would not be coming back to light. And I'm glad that the information was received by myself and Dr. Albers. And again, we're going to be ripping through all of this, but it just goes to show you how long this has been going on. This isn't just something that popped up on the internet a few years ago. Okay, they've been at this cover up for a long period of time. And as they learn more and as other scientists learn more, they decide what information can be viewed to the public and other scientists. And just like this information, this was overwhelming. But this is something that would change the course of science and astronomy and certainly astrophysics. And what did they do? They squashed it into the ground. They stole the information. They changed the information. And then they leaked it out to the internet. And that's exactly what happened. Am I correct, Dr. Albers?
Absolutely. So they turned true research into disinformation.
Bingo. Let's go over this next part about the sun's heliosphere, because this also was incredibly intriguing information.
Definitely. So it is believed that the solar system is shaped like an egg with a long tail. But it turns out that, first of all, the solar system is shrinking in size. And the shape that you see, that type of horseshoe shape that you see on the right-hand side, seems to be what it's actually like. So instead of one long tail, it has a tail at the top and a tail at the bottom. And in between the two tails is the interstellar medium, which is actually compressing the solar system. And again, what would lead to that? Don't forget, we now have a high energy medium outside the solar system from which the stellar cores are likely to come from. And the stellar cores would then the stellar core medium containing the stellar cores would then compress our solar system. And as the sun gets weaker and the speed of the solar wind declines, the solar system is likely to continue to decrease in size.
And so again, this was groundbreaking information that came out many years ago, and this information was squashed.
Yes. It, like everything else, NASA seems to have one goal, and that is to hide the fact that this is happening to our solar system.
Well, let's not forget that, NASA is really not calling the shots, ladies and gentlemen. I know we hack on NASA quite a bit, but there's people behind the scenes that are pulling the strings on NASA.
Yeah, that's right.
Because NASA came about as a private / public organization. Then it was taken over by the government. The government pulls the strings at NASA from the top to the bottom.
Yes.
Let's get into what you have here on this figure 7.
And then David Wilcock also mentioned the fact that the solar wind stopped completely for a period of about 24 hours in 1999.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this is likely to occur again because of the interaction between the stellar cores and the sun. As the sun gets weaker, it may go through periods where it cannot produce a solar wind anymore. And probably the first event ever to occur occurred in 1999. And it may be happening again in the future. I mean, eventually, don't forget the stellar cores are slowly destroying the sun. There will come a time where most of the time there will be no solar wind and no light coming off it either. And that doesn't mean that it's still not dangerous. It can still react even though it looks like it's dead. Now, in 2003, it was detected that cosmic dust, most likely stellar core dust, because we know that's what's coming into our atmosphere anyway and causing these clouds in our skies. Well, there were measurements done that showed that the stellar core, this dust was filling our solar system and it was affecting the sun. So that was one of the things David mentioned. And then 2008 measurements showed that the heliosphere, which is the sun's bubble around the sun, which is the equivalent to the Earth's magnetosphere around the Earth, is decreasing in size. And this is most likely due to the compression from outside the solar system, which I have already mentioned.
Now, Dr. Albers, throughout your report, I noticed that you've left a lot of reference points that are at the bottom.
Yes, I've put in at the bottom.
Okay, we'll go over those reference points right after your conclusion. But folks, I just wanted to reiterate once again. We're not making this information up. This is well documented scientific information that has been written about. We're digging up the information. We're going to continue to go back through it. And that's just the bottom line. It's going to, like I said, it's going to take weeks, possibly even, more than a month or so, maybe even longer than that, to dig through it. Because I can tell you this much. As we dig through this information, I know that we're going to be pointed in different directions. And we're going to go at it. We're going to go out there and we're going to find the truth about what's been happening for many, many years. Just not the last couple of years, and people out there putting crazy end of the world videos on YouTube and talking about it on Facebook. We're going after the hardcore evidence that is out there. And there are some very, very smart, intelligent people that have delved into this, that have produced this information. And again, it's documented. Documented evidence. This is crushing. Dr. Albers, your conclusion before we get to those references.
Okay, so basically I concluded that the invasion of our solar system by the stellar core system, and as you know, I've named it the Planet X system of stellar cores. We use the name Planet X because that's what Dr. Carrington used when he went out to look at this object. And don't forget, he went out in 1981 to New Zealand. And he most likely found something, because we know that he was killed after that. And then in 1989, just a few years later, we had this huge, that's when these X-class flares started. It was only a few years later. So it's actually likely that what he observed was one of these large stellar cores coming in towards the sun. And anyway, so that's why I called it the Planet X. But my conclusion is that this system has dramatically changed our sun. And that has made life on Earth dangerous, because the sun can at any time do something that can affect our life on this planet.
Dr. Albers, we had a quick question for you from an individual in the live chat. And it says, please ask Dr. Albers how our atmosphere and gaseous entities are not ripped apart if we are truly moving through space at an average speed of 515,000 miles per hour or 828,000 kilometers per hour. So how is our atmosphere not ripped away as we travel in space?
Well, the thing is, we still have space that is mostly empty. I mean, I'm talking about particles. There's lots of particles. There's the solar wind in space. But the thing is, it's still mostly empty space, and gravity keeps our planet as one entity. It keeps it together. So it's not going to cause friction. We don't actually have a frictional force or enough of a frictional force to cause any effect such as our atmosphere being blown away.
Yeah, and also, you know, just to put this out there, you know, traveling at a fast speed here on Earth, you know, you feel those G forces. You feel the force of speed here on Earth. Feeling the force of speed in space, you pretty much don't feel it. If you just think about the astronauts, you know, being blasted off into space, moving at 10, 20,000 miles per hour, and, you know, and then circling the planet in the International Space Station. They're moving very, very rapidly, but they're not feeling that actual speed.
Yeah,
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, don't forget the ISS is way above. It's still within the atmosphere, but not where the atmosphere is dense enough to cause enough friction to affect the motion of the space station. So already up there you have very small, a very low density of particles, and you don't really have friction. So, you know, in outer space, you would have even less.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like whenever the space shuttle or any spacecraft comes back into the Earth's atmosphere, they start to feel that friction, and the speed starts to heat the craft up.
That's right.
That's a very interesting question. I've always thought about that myself. You know, the speeds in space compared to what we refer to as speed here on Earth. Two totally different entities, and definitely a really cool question. But I wanted to buzz down here to the references that you had for your article.
Yeah.
And again, folks, I just wanted to reiterate, you know, we're not making this stuff up. You know, these are documents and reports and papers that we're going to be delving into, and the people behind them, well, you know, they're educated individuals that did the research. So you want to go over your references?
Yeah, okay. So I start with James McKenney, his book, which is very important. It tells us about the connection between the comets and what happens to the sun, and the sun becomes very reactive two comets approaching it, and it has CMEs in the direction of comets. So from that, we can see that the electron current that they draw affects what happens to the sun, and the stellar cores do something similar. And then the next one is one of my articles where I show that the stellar cores exert a very weak gravitational force on other objects in the solar system. That's the stellar core gravity, tidal, and G is not constant. G is the gravitational constant. And I have shown that the stellar cores, the stellar cores show, if you study them, that that constant is not actually constant and is very low in the case of the stellar cores. And then there's Halton Arp's book, Seeing Red, where he very carefully details through his astronomical observations that redshift is not due to recessional velocity. And he comes up through his observations with the explanation that galaxies are creating matter, and the universe is, there's matter creation occurring all over the place, and light is turning into matter. And then two more of mine, stellar core evolution, where I describe how a star would go through the evolution process that would turn it eventually into a dead star or a stellar core. And then the next one is one of my latest articles where I explain that the stellar core debris coming into our atmosphere and causing these effects such as noctilucent clouds and these strange light-emitting clouds in our atmosphere. The next one is Mike Lockwood's paper in Nature, where and this is from, I think, 1999, where he shows that a doubling of the sun's coronal magnetic field has occurred in the last 100 years. And the next one is from Yusiskan, and she does the history of solar activity over millennia using the ice core samples. And it shows that in the last 8,000 years, the sun was actually going through a very low activity until about 200 years ago, when it started becoming much, much more active. And that again shows us that it's the stellar core system affecting it. And then the next one, I'm not even sure what the next one was. The NAS, it was, I can't remember. 9 is the space dust. And then number 10 is about the fact that the heliosphere is shrinking. So that's one of the papers I found about that. I'm not sure what number 8 was. We'd have to go back up and see where that is.
Well, I'll tell you what. Very, very, very intriguing information. That was a fantastic report that you did.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be many, many more to come as we uncover more of this information and we go through it. Just one second. I want to share a screen with all of you real quick. Just give me a second. Alrighty then. Let me get back to my Google Hangout screen.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll just go ahead and bring this up here real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you have asked quite a bit about reading Dr. Albers' reports. And we decided to start putting the reports into book form so you guys can read it. We did the first part. There's 2 parts to this series. There may even be a part 3. Yesterday, I published her latest book, Planet X Physicist Articles Part 1. Dr. Albers, how many reports are actually in this?
I think
quite a bit.
I'm not sure. I think it's about 40.
Yeah, there's a lot of reports, a lot of information.
Yeah, so it's a lot of them. It will definitely be a lot thicker than the other books we've published before, possibly twice as thick.
Yes. Now, this is also available in a paperback book, which I would recommend because, you can always go back to it and refer and show people, physically show them. It's also available in the Kindle version. But because the book was so thick, so much information in it, the publishing cost with Amazon was pretty high.
Yeah.
This book is in an 8.5 by 10 format, like a magazine type format, and it was quite expensive to publish. So they placed a $35 price tag on it to get it out there and publish it. The royalty for Dr. Albers is like $2.56. You can jack the price of the book up and increase your royalty, but that's not what we're about. We want everybody to have the ability to buy the book, read the information at leisure, and share it with other people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vital information in there. All of our discovery and captures, the photographs that we've discovered, on SOHO and SDO and the cactus and so on and so forth. It's all packed into this first part. There will probably be a part 3. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be publishing the part 2 in this series. And I mean, I wish there was another way to get the price way, way down. But folks, as soon as I went to publish this yesterday, the information came up from Amazon that the actual printing cost was going to be pretty excessive. And we weren't worried about, the royalties or anything like that. So we tried to keep the price down as low as we could. Yeah. And $35 was where we were at. And I know it sounds a little expensive, but if you are interested, the new Planet X Physicist articles, part 1, is now available on Amazon. There's a link in the description box under all of our videos for direct access to all of the books that Dr. Albers and I have published. If you just go to Amazon and you're trying to look for her books, just go into Amazon and go into books, and in the search box, just type in Dr. Claudia Albers, Albers. All of her books come up, and you can go at it. But I just wanted to make that announcement. It's up and running. I'll have part 2 published probably sometime tomorrow. It's definitely fantastic reading material, and it adds a lot right into your mind about what we're dealing with. And Dr. Albers has a very, very good way of explaining this to a lot of us that don't have this deep scientific background. But after reading through those reports and even doing a little bit of research on your own and referencing her reports, it does expand your mind. It helps you understand more about what is happening. So consider the $35 an investment to your knowledge. That's how I look at it. And like I said, I will definitely be working on getting part 2 out there probably sometime tomorrow.
Yeah.
Dr. Albers, it was it was a pleasure having you on here with us again.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, the book basically details the discoveries that we both made and my increasing understanding of what's going on in the solar system and my increasing understanding of how things work in the universe, in the solar system, in the sun. This is what I have done to understand what's going on. The writing itself of articles often allows me to discover some new detail about how things work. And that you can read as you go through the article. You can actually see the development of the understanding.
Yeah, that article was very, very good. It actually helped me understand a lot more of what we're getting into. And ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you stay tuned, stay subscribed to Planet X News and also Dr. Albers' YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook. You know, I'm able to put a lot more information up on Facebook. They've been filtering our content as of lately. Nothing I can do about it. You know, I fight enough with YouTube. I fight enough with Facebook. I'm sick and tired of it. Well, we're just going to keep on moving forward. And when things get a lot more better, when things get better with Real.video, as they add more features and they get all of the little kinks out of that new platform, we're going to be utilizing it every single day. And then YouTube, yeah, that will be in the past. I'm tired of being censored. I'm tired of being filtered. So is Dr. Albers. It's not right. If there was something to hide, they're hiding it by doing this, by censoring it and filtering it and not allowing people that subscribe to this channel to see and hear the information. But I'm tired of complaining. They can do what they want. Blah, blah, blah. But anyways, folks, listen. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation tonight. There will be many, many more. I'd like to thank Dr. Albers for being on with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you stay tuned to Planet X News and our Planet X physicist, Dr. Claudia Albers. Have a safe weekend, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Dr. Albers this evening, and we're going to be going over some new information that we've uncovered. And let me just get a few things straightened out here, and we'll go ahead and begin. Dr. Albers, how are you, by the way?
I'm very well, thank you, Scott. And how are you?
Not doing too bad. A little tired, but I'll get over that.
Okay, good.
Okay. I'm just pulling up the live chat here real quick.